about technology. We've talked about the science of climate change and the technicalities of it, what happens. We're going to switch the day today and talk a little bit about communities, justice, especially food justice, a little bit more about critical thinking, a different perspective than we've had before, and solidarity in the community through agriculture. And our last session today, repeat of Peter Steves, who has been at every one of the SISE meetings, I think, since the beginning. And he'll talk about an interesting topic. Is this really what we want to sustain? So, but let's focus now on today's session. Has to do with food justice and communities. We have three panelists. The first one is Pastor Reshorna Fitzpatrick. Really happy that she's here. She's the pastor of the Stone Temple Missionary Baptist Church and the founder and pastor of Proceeding Word Church in Chicago. She was mentored by the late pastor Katie Moon at the Good News Community Church, where she was a faithful member for 25 years. She has worked extensively with the Urban Ministries Institute in Chicago and received additional theological training there. She has a bachelor's degree in public administration. She has master's degrees in forensic psychology and theology from North Carolina College of Theology. She has an honorary doctorate of divinity from World Christianship Ministries. And in 2007, she, along with her husband, Bishop Derek Fitzpatrick, co-founded the Dominion College of Theology. It's a satellite college of North Carolina College of Theology. She's currently, if that's not enough, she's currently employed by the Chicago Public Schools as a hearing officer. So very interesting person. Thank you very much, Reshorna, for joining us.
Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. And Annamaria Leone is another repeat of SISE. She's been with us for years and years. I'm sure Thomas can tell us how many. At the moment, it slips my mind. She's the co-founder of Permaculture Chicago Teaching Institute and co-owner of Home and Grown. That's a Chicago word, home, and it's a place. It's a social enterprise focused on propagating urban durable perennials and on creating regenerative, edible, and ornamental landscapes. She's a certified permaculture designer and a teacher. She's a co-founder of the Permaculture Chicago Teaching Institute, which is in North Lawndale neighborhood of Chicago on the west side. Annamaria focuses her community organizing efforts through projects that reflect her love for greening and beautification. Welcome, Annamaria. We're looking forward to hearing from you, of course. And our third panelist, Julie Siegel. She's the president of J. Siegel Designs, Inc., and Sustainable Sharing with Guatemala. She's practiced as a Chicago area landscape designer for more than 2 decades. She first connected with Guatemala over 35 years ago doing sanctuary work with refugees from their civil war. In 2005, she began supporting and visiting Guatemala to collaborate with rural, impoverished indigenous Maya to create autonomy and sovereignty. She founded the nonprofit Sustainable Sharing with Guatemala in 2010, served as its president since its founding, and makes annual visits to Guatemala since 2005. Former president and board member of Midwest Ecological Landscape Association. Her previous work was as a writer and a teacher. She feels lucky and grateful to have been schooled in the arts by a family of photographers and painters. So a really interesting lineup of panelists. They will have about a half an hour presentation they'll share. Then we'll open it up, and please, fellows, put your questions and comments in the chat. Looking forward to seeing what you guys have to say, and I think let's go for it. So, Annamaria, do you want to start the session?
Yep, absolutely. It looks also like Julie is not on, so I will be giving her part until she gets back on. She's been having some Zoom issues. All right, so let's go ahead. So good morning, everybody, and good afternoon or good evening, wherever you're coming in from. As George said, I'm Annamaria, and we gave this presentation actually to the Chicago Food Policy Action Network back in April. And when Thomas asked us, what we were up to in North Lawndale, we started to tell him about this collaboration that we've been doing between the Sustainable Sharing with Guatemala and also with what's happening in North Lawndale. What also, George, Pastor Reshorna is actually my business partner now. So she's retired from the Chicago police hearing, is that right, Pastor Reshorna? And now we are both working together on Home and Grown with the Perennial Nursery, and also the Love Blooms Here Plaza, which we'll talk a little bit more about. So this presentation was based on building resilient food systems, and also like, what are we doing in Guatemala that reflects what's going on here in Chicago, and what is it in Chicago that we're learning that we can also take back to Guatemala. This is why it's called Sustainable Sharing with Guatemala. And this is the food systems right here on the left-hand side. This is Chepe, what was his first? Chepe Jose. Yeah, this is his wife. We were having a birthday party for him. And he was one of the refugees from the Guatemalan Civil War. He actually went to Mexico to get away from the Civil War, and then he came back. And so he's also one of the people inside of the Sustainable Sharing with Guatemala. They have an organization in Guatemala called AFOPADI, and this is not moving forward. Hold on one second. Let me stop, and then I'll start again.
Wow.
And then on the right-hand side, that's Dr. Israel and a neighbor, how we were able to take vacant lots in Chicago and turn them into urban ag centers. Okay. So the first thing we'll do is we'll go over what we do in Guatemala. So I'm also the vice president of Sustainable Sharing with Guatemala, and I had the very great privilege of being able to go there last year before COVID happened and take a look at what they were doing in their communities to address food justice and food injustice or food insecurity. So this is where we were. We were in Casaca, and you could see this is on the western highlands of Guatemala. And this is a picture of the indigenous peoples. What I really got to see is how communal they all are. Like, they're sitting all around, and that's all sacks of corn. But that was what struck me the most, was just how intergenerational they were. They all spoke about, what was going on with their families, and just they had a life where they're talking about the buen vivir, and I'll address that in 1 second. This is Don Juan, and Don Juan Marcos, and he was one of the refugees also during the Civil War, and he had to get away from the army. So instead of trying to leave Guatemala, he went up further into the mountains, and this is about 10,000 feet up. And he was able to create a forest garden, which we'll look at very shortly. But what he had to do was he took up his whole family. They had no water. Seeds, he had a very great working knowledge of the indigenous species that were around, and that's how they were able to make it. This is a typical person that they would, the AFOPADI deals with, giving them like, talking with them about self-care. You can see back here, she actually has a baby here. She was, this particular person, she was 17 years old, and she already had 2 children. And they raised chickens and goats. So that is part of what we do inside of our organization, is we share our resources from Chicago to the group AFOPADI, and they go and they talk about self-care, how do you take care of chickens, how do you deal with all types of community issues. And the very first thing that we did when we got down there was to be able to speak with them about their annual plans. And they do is called a land acknowledgement. You know, our version of land acknowledgement. We also have that during our major meetings, and Pastor Reshorna will lead that. But I just want to read to you the land acknowledgement that we were able to witness when we were at their meeting. And I'm going to say it in Spanish. So, to the east, gran creador, tú nos formaste, corazón del cielo, corazón de la tierra. Te damos gracias por habernos creado, Dios del trueno, Dios de la lluvia. Desde la salida del sol buscamos la paz en el mundo entero, que haya libertad, tranquilidad, salud para todos los hijos que viven en el este, donde el sol se levanta. To the west, oeste, te pedimos también a la puesta del sol hacia al oeste, que todo sufrimiento, toda pena, todo rencor terminen como el día termine. Que tu luz ilumine los pensamientos, las vidas de los que lloran, de los que sufren, de los que están oprimidos, de los que no han oído. To the south, rogamos hacia al sur, donde el corazón del mar purifica toda corrupción, enfermedad, pestilencia. Danos fortaleza para que nuestras voces lleguen a tu corazón, a tus manos y a tus pies. Nos postramos delante de ti con nuestras ofrendas, invocándote día y noche. To the north, rogamos hacia al norte, desde los 4 puntos cardinales de este mundo, confiando en que el corazón del viento llevará hasta tus oídos la voz, el clamor de tus hijos. Oh gran creador, corazón del cielo, corazón de la tierra, nuestra madre, danos vida, mucha vida, y una existencia útil para que nuestros pueblos encuentren la paz en todas las naciones del mundo. So all their ceremonies are always open to the 4 cardinal points and also to the other sub-cardinals. And this is a way for them to continue to keep their indigenous practices and to also honor who we are as on the nations and the peoples of this earth. And this is what is the main philosophy of Afopati. And this is called liberation theology. Have any of you heard of liberation theology before? It's a very long topic, but it's very, this theology is the way Afopati deals with the issues that are going on in Guatemala, a lot of this in Latin America. Buen vivir means to live well, but when? Now. And it's also to provide a sense of autonomy. And they take a look at your autonomy as an individual, as the collective, with what it is to defend your territory. What is it to take a look at what constitutes your territory? You know, the indigenous peoples have their territories been taken away. And why we say this, and Pastor Reshorna is going to be able to contrast this, it's the same thing that happens in our communities that are disinvested. You know, our territory is taken away. We don't know what our rights are. How do we take our own customs and traditions where we've been on our land for many, many years, even if it's on the west side of Chicago, and continue to appropriate that as our own instead of having it be taken away. And also what's based in what we do in Guatemala is the sense of permaculture, permanent agriculture, permanent culture. And if you look at every large or long sustaining society is always based on the health of their soil, the health of their forests, the health of their natural resources, and how they live, the health of their spirit. Are they able to continue with their own education, with their own culture? Are they able to steward the land in the way that they want to? So permaculture is based also in ethics. And the very first ethic is caring for the earth. So many indigenous cultures, all indigenous cultures are based in the earth, caring for the earth. Then you care for the people, yourself, your family, and then you care for your community. So that is the purpose of, or the premise on how Afopati and sustainable sharing with Guatemala works together. These are just the principles of permaculture. You can look at this at any time. You just Google permaculture and you'll be able to find it. This is the topics that the Afopati covers. It covers violence against women. What are men's rights? What is toxic masculinity? Water. How do you care for animals? I mean, this is just such a holistic way of looking at community. And how do you also policy, how do you talk to government? And they have a very small group of people that works with 8 communities throughout the region. And they've been doing this now for 25 years, more than that. And this person,
So I'm back, Annamaria.
Oh, thank you, Julie. You can say this so much better than I can. So you want to go ahead?
I just thought I'd jump in, talk a little bit. So
Yeah,
I'm not sure because I got bumped out. What you covered in terms of Afopati and our relation to it and the structure, but and the parallels with some of the communities in North Lawndale. But this image is interesting because actually the man on the right is a government representative in Guatemala, and he was supposed to talk to Afopati about helping with the lack of water resources in the area. What was so telling here is that he ended up going away, asking Afopati to help him. And I think it points out sometimes the nebulous relationship between these groups, both in Guatemala and in North Lawndale, with governments and corporations for support. This is a place where, even though we're speaking a lot about the similarities in terms of racism and sexism and poverty, this is a little bit different in Guatemala because the paradigm, I think, that's hard for a lot of us to understand here is that in Guatemala, there's virtually no governmental or corporate or philanthropical support from inside the country. And so we were posting this because it illustrates just the opposite. So you're the one who's in control, Annamaria, for the slides. All right, so here we talk about really degraded sites in the city of Chicago and North Lawndale, but here we have it even more so. And I don't know how much Annamaria touched on climate change in terms of this area, but they are not only the climate change canaries, but up in land that is so poor that no one would ever be farming there if they had other options. But because of the wealth inequity and the unequal land distribution, the people we work with are farming up at 9,000 feet here. This is during the dry season, and you can see the permaculture methods that they've used here with the terracing and composting. And one thing I always find so hard for people here to understand, because our problem in the United States is that we have so much excess, we're trying to get rid of it. You have to wrap your mind around a place where there is virtually nothing extra. So composting becomes a very challenging practice. And our partners, Afopati, have a lot of workshops on creative ways to do that. What's the next one? Here, this is the thing, as Americans, most of us think a lot in terms of sustainable technology with things, and things are certainly incredibly important, especially when most people do not have access to water. So one of the great things is to get a cistern, and that again requires a lot of international collaboration, both with funding and Engineers Without Borders. But it really is something that's very life-saving. It will keep somebody for half of the dry season, which is, well, it normally used to be about 6 months this season. That's all changing with climate change. But Annamaria is going to take over here because this was rather an exceptional occurrence we saw with water, and it really impressed her.
When you look at this picture, it's looks really benign, right? But if you can see here, this is a water spigot, and this was where women or men were to come and wash their clothing. But Doña Juana, she and her husband, they were approached by the local government, and the government said, we're going to give you some money, but you have to build a road. And they're like, well, we don't need another road, we need water. And they said, no, you got to build a road. So they took the money and they built that system that you see here. And the government came back and said, we're going to put you in jail. for malfeasance. And they're like, but we didn't need that road. So the government ended up letting them go, but they had to sign a piece of paper that said that they had been responsible for not utilizing the funds that they were given. And when you look at what the impact has been of having this water for their community, it's much greater than having had that road. So what struck me here was just the amount of community that rallied around her courage to be able to go against what the government wanted versus really what the community needed. And then did you want to talk about this one, Julie? This is
Don Marcos. Oh, well.
I'm sorry. So Don Marcos, this is the same person that we saw in the previous slides, where he went all the way up into the mountains to get away from the Civil War. And he created this food forest where everything in this, what you saw in his forest garden was edible. And he was able to save seeds and share that. And what struck me was the resourcefulness. And Veronica Giron, who's one of the key players in Guatemala that we deal with, she said that, and this also struck me, when climate change happens, the people who will save the world will be the indigenous peoples, because they know the seeds, they know the foods, they understand the cycles. And so it's not going to be science that will ultimately save us on the ground. It will be the indigenous peoples. And it just really, it hit home. Go ahead, Julie.
Do you want to go to the next image?
So this is a plantation. One of the chepes that Julie is talking with here, he's also one of the facilitators. He created his own coffee plantation here using all of the things that he learned. He has bananas and coffee plants and other greens that he cultivates.
I think what's interesting here is that during the pandemic, Afapati, one of the things that's very sustainable about them is that they are able to shrink and adapt to the circumstances. So you have there in that parcella that is being used for the youth university, just to train the youth. Here we have an example of one of the local indigenous women who became educated enough. She is the local nurse there. The next image is, I believe, some of the other local facilitators. Annamarie, can you?
Yeah, and that's what you see there.
Please?
We raised money in Chicago to be able to give them like lamps. You could see here, this is their headlamps and with their batteries, because a lot of times they'll go up into the mountains and they come back very late. So they need a way to be able to look down onto the trails that they visit. And also they were very happy to get these water bottles, you know, just things that we take so much for granted here in the United States. And then this is also, again, what Julie was pointing to, because they are so small and yet very adaptable, they were able to adapt quickly to what it was needed for the COVID response in 2020.
Yeah,
So
Annamarie, one of the other things I wanted to point out in the previous slide, when you saw some of the local facilitators, a big change in Afapati that I've witnessed over the 15 years is that they used to be separated in agriculture, education, and medicine. And a few years ago, they decided to integrate and to do every program together. And I think that speaks to our focus here on integration and sharing and sustainability. We've been in touch a lot with Afapati lately about some programs, and Veronica, who Annamaria mentioned, keeps stressing that really the sustainable part is working in community, that nothing else is going to happen without that. And again, I think here in the States, we're so focused on things and technology, and of course, we need it all, but none of it happens unless there are people connecting and engaging and moving the community. And I think the last slide from us, and then we'll hope we've got to get to Pastor Reshorna, is the one, the next one on that of Miguel, who is the next slide, who is one of the people who has been raised with the Youth University. And that's why we're speaking to all of you, because really the future is in younger people who come with more open and evolved ideas. And the same thing is happening in Guatemala. So I'm not sure how much Annamaria talked about some of the parallels with North Lawndale, but I know Pastor Reshorna will do a great job.
So Pastor Reshorna?
Hello and good morning, everyone. I was still waiting for Annamaria and Julie to give us some more, because it's so interesting to learn about what's taking place in Guatemala, how resilient they are. And it brings me to my topic. We know that we've been in a pandemic, but long before the pandemic, North Lawndale has been disinvested in. And so I want to talk a little bit about where North Lawndale is. Well, I don't have to talk about it because you can see the map. So that's great that you have the map there for me. But here is where North Lawndale is. And if we can remember, back in the 60s, when the civil rights was happening, this was a place where we experienced a lot of the riots. And Annamaria, you can go back to the young guys that are looking. These individuals have an opportunity, and Annamaria will share with us, to see across our city and just to be able to experience what Chicago really looks like, and through the eyes of a child, get an understanding of, wow, this is a beautiful city. But much more than that, there's so many things that can be done when people come together to take care of their land, to take care of one another, and to make sure that we do things in a way that put us in a place of stewardship.
And also, yeah, when we did this this presentation at the Food Policy Action Council, we also read the acknowledgement, the land acknowledgement, which you can find on the Chicago, City of Chicago. The City of Chicago passed a land resolution in 2018, I believe. And it also acknowledges all of the indigenous tribes and the peoples that have been and still are in Chicago. So that's what this slide is about.
So I will read the land acknowledgement. Whereas the City of Chicago acknowledged that the Chicago, formerly known as Zig-Gaga, to Native people, the sites of the edge of multiple ecosystems, including swamps, oak savanna, and the prairie with waterways connecting the Mississippi River and the Great Lakes. Can you just see the young people looking and seeing all that we're talking about today? Whereas the City of Chicago acknowledges sits upon ancestral homeland to the Anishinaabe, Nishui, Mi'kmaq, Council of Three Fires, Ojibwe, Odawa, and the Potawatomi, along with dozens of tribes who cultivated and molded the land to suit their needs since time immemorial. Whereas the City of Chicago acknowledged that an acknowledgement of the land in an indigenous protocol performed on indigenous land across the globe. Whereas the City of Chicago acknowledges Anishinaabe, Nishui, Mi'kmaq for providing the names of the Chicago and Lake Michigan along the territories, the multiple territory, waterways, roads, and parks in and around Chicago. Whereas the City of Chicago acknowledged it was and is a site trade, travel, and healing for indigenous peoples since the immemorial. Whereas the City of Chicago acknowledges indigenous knowledge systems and infrastructure continue to be appropriated as a blueprint of Chicago. Whereas the City of Chicago acknowledges that the treaties made with the people of the Three Fires have not been honored, and the destruction and the disposition of the land and the life of indigenous people continues until this day. Whereas the City of Chicago acknowledges that colonism is an ongoing structure, we need to build our mindfulness of our present participation to deconstruct the romanticism of forced removal and prevent further genocide of the remaining indigenous people. Whereas the city of Chicago acknowledges it is currently home for over 75,000 American Indians known as urban Indians who keep their tribal kinship and cultures spanning from over 150 tribal nations. Whereas the city of Chicago acknowledges and supports the modern indigenous people of Chicago, along with those who view Chicago as their ancestral territory and continue to practice their kinship, culture, harvest their medicines and foods that continue to grow in Chicago. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the city of Chicago acknowledges the land we occupy as indigenous homelands and have great appreciation and gratitude to those whose territory we occupy. Be it further resolved, the city of Chicago acknowledges the remarkable resilience of the indigenous people and the American Indian community that continues to practice their tribal and intertribal cultures while flourishing in modern day Chicago and continue to enhance our great city's beauty. I want to take a break right now and embrace that, and I wish you would do that with me. Thank you.
Powerful.
So as I started to say in the 60s, after the riots, after the death of King, North Lawndale suffered lots of losses, including buildings, including people moving out of North Lawndale. And it was just, as you see, it was a war zone. And we're still trying to recover from the 60s and what took place. Buildings were burned, this community was literally destroyed. And thank God that there are people who are in position now to reconfigure, reclaim, and reconstruct the North Lawndale community. And you've got to do it by taking care of the people, by taking care of the land, and acknowledging those who were here before and learning how to incorporate some of those practices. This is a vacant lot, and you can see 1,000 of these in North Lawndale, but we are working to beautify, to clean and green our community, to put places and spaces where people can cultivate food. This is a vacant lot that I'm all too familiar with. 3 years ago, when I retired from the city of Chicago Public Schools, this lot was adjacent to our church in North Lawndale, the historic Stone Temple Church. And the church is historic for two reasons. Number one, the Queen of Romania visited the church in 1926. It was a Jewish temple. And in 1954, it was purchased by the late Reverend J.M. Stone, who actually was very close friends with the father of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Is first allowed to come and give messages on redlining and community development and how to help North Lawndale be a better place, or the city of Chicago be a better, and treat people just with the spirit of unity and equity. So this vacant lot, as you see it this way today, you won't see it that way again, because we're going to show you from planning and creating and getting with a group of people who were knowledgeable about how to create gardens and to develop some food sustainability. We got together, had these conversations, and a garden ensued. Annamaria earlier talked to you about the permaculture principles. Well, those principles work in our everyday life. And oftentimes I get stuck right in the center, which takes me all the way from 1 to 12. Taking care of our earth. That's number one. If we can't get the food to be produced from the earth, then we're just going to really starve and be unhealthy. But then that helps us take care of one another and take care of people. And then all that we do, we should ensure that there is equity. And equity means making sure that people get their fair share. I may not need as much as you need, but I need what I need. So make sure that what I receive is fair for what I am entitled to. And if we do that, the permaculture principles will work for all of us, and we'll be able to be resilient, and we'll be able to sustain our community. All 77 of them will be sustainable. Here's another vacant lot. I told you that there are many vacant lots in our communities, but here's another one. And I'm going to show you pictures through Annamaria's pressing of the finger, how these lands are cultivated and how things become so beautiful. So the land that you saw before, this strike of land that was just grassy, is now a food forest in Chicago's North Lawndale community. It's right on the corner of St. Louis and Douglas. And when I tell you this is a place of peace and food, because those berries came out of that food forest that was once just a plain vacant lot with grass. And so here's one of our neighbors. He's picking plums.
This is actually Slum Busters. This is another garden that we converted from being underneath the railroad tracks to a place where you can actually grow food.
And those pears are actually, I just had to say it, those pears are delicious because I've actually had some myself, right? Absolutely delicious. And during the pandemic, we talk about sustainability, we talk about taking care of one another. There was such a shortage of masks. So we got together, a group of us, and went into the church and began to make masks. So much so it reminded me when I saw the pictures of the women in Guatemala getting masks all over the world. We were in need of this, and we had to find a way how to keep one another safe. And we pulled together, and shows how resilient we are, shows how we want to make sure that we're alignment with one another, making sure we're taking care of one another. What you see here is another blank space of land. Remember I told you guys earlier, you're going to see this vacant lot, but it's not going to be the same. That lot is what you see here. On that lot, we built a 10 garden beds that's filled with tomatoes and onions and peppers and collard greens and mustard greens. And then we have a flower garden, because I believe we need food, we need flowers, we need things to smell good and to look good. But not only that, we need to have a place where we can tell our stories and tell our narratives and come together and celebrate while we're growing food and while we're eating. And that is what you see before you, a stage that was provided to us by another organization that understands the permaculture, that we're taking care of each other, we're taking care of our land, and we're also in a position where we are getting our fair share. Here, what do we do during a pandemic? We make sure we feed one another. So talk about resilience. When the pandemic hit, nobody was really ready for it because nobody knew what was going to happen. So what it did was highlight the already deprivation that existed in our community. So what did we do? We jumped into action. We realized that people were hungry, that they needed food. So we got with another organization, the Love Fridge. We got a free refrigerator. We have canned foods. We have all sorts of food that you can eat. Come to our fridge, open it up, and it's packed with food on a daily basis. But then we still knew that there was a sense of homelessness in our community. So we got to take care of each other. So we started what we call Soup for the Soul. And all during the winter, every Monday, we would come out and we would provide 200 cups of hot soup to our community members. And not only would we provide soup, but we partnered with Urban Growers Collective, and we have the food bus that comes out and give fresh fruit and produce to people in the community. When I say fresh, Urban Growers Collective is a fresh farm. They produce this food and they bring it to the community. Talking about celebrating, we also joined in with Fight to Feed. When I say we have partners that provide the things that we need to take care of ourselves, to take care of our earth, and to make sure that we have our fair share. And people love to be in our presence because we are taking care of them while they're taking care of us, while we're taking care of the earth. So what we did was we're able to obtain a grant from the American Heart Association, the Bernard J. Tyson Impact Award. And I'm really happy with what we have garnered from this whole process. We have food that is being rescued by Fight to Feed. Fight to Feed provides us with the food. We are now developing a commercial kitchen. That commercial kitchen will be able to create some value-added products that we can sell to have a social enterprise. In addition to that, we will have food waste, where we have a compost company coming, where we will be able to not just put stuff in a dumpster and send it off to a landfill, but we will be in a position where we will compost and create soil. So here we go, taking care of the earth. And all this is happening in this hub of Stone Temple. In addition to the composting, we're also going to have a free community store. Did I say free community store? Yes. People will be able to clean and green their community, earn hours for working in their community, and come to the free store, turn in a card of how many hours they put in, and be able to get food from that free store. We are going to also have farmers markets where people in the community can come and get fresh food, fruit and vegetables from a farmer's market. Talk about resilient food system. That's what we're trying to create. Did I say trying? I meant to say that's what we are creating, because we don't really try to do anything. We just make things happen. There is a pharmacist that's in our community since the 60s, where we are working with him to create a grocery store where these products will be able to be sold in the grocery store. So there's a lot of excitement that's going on in North Lawndale. There are 8 actually gardens connected to this. And we also, with our partners, have created home gardens for people in the community with grow bags. And you guys are a part of that. We have tomatoes, peppers, and onions growing in the backyard or even on the front porch, because we're using grow bags for the people in our community. Talk about exciting. This is truly exciting because it takes us back to our permaculture idea, taking care of the land, taking care of each other, and then everybody getting their fair share. So this is how that works. They come to the church, they receive these items, they take them home. So everybody gets as many as they want to take home, whatever they need to create this food resilience systems that we have here in North Lawndale. I appreciate you guys giving us this time to share. Thank you for having us, and thank you for my partners in crime, because we are criming up the community with good things, and we are happy about it.
What a presentation. Thank you, guys. I like your closing line. We're partners in crime. I love it. So lots of comments here from the fellows. And let's start out with, let's see, it was, I think it was, Sebastian, you mentioned a book, Archipelago of Hope. You want to say a little bit about that, how you came in contact with that book and what's in it?
Yeah, so I had a course on the history of the environment this past year in Northwestern, and we had to read one of 3 books. The book I decided to read was Archipelago of Hope, which is, I think, a really good anthology of many different indigenous cultures and what they're doing in the face of climate change, because the climate is changing for everyone, especially the people who are least responsible for it. And it is hopeful because the indigenous peoples are finding ways to change with their land, but it is also frightening because some of the peoples will say things like, oh, we've lived here since time immemorial. We knew when the rains would come. Now we don't know when it's going to rain. They don't recognize their own skies. But at the same time, it's very focused on the fact that without indigenous knowledge, we will not make it through climate change. And that just really reminded me of what Annamaria was talking about with Guatemala.
Great comment, thank you. And Sebastian, I think you were commenting on the book as well. Would you like to share?
Wait, what do you mean?
No, Sebastian. Oh, sorry. That's you.
Yeah.
That's great. Okay, that's a comment. Okay, anybody else want to make a comment about indigenous people, about experience with it?
George, I'm looking through the chat.
Yeah.
So someone asked, let's see, Henrietta, you asked, are these lots deeded to the local government, community nonprofit group, or other? So some of the lots are, they're under a trust. It's called Neighbor Space. And it was created by the city of Chicago. And that organization holds the deed to some of these lots for 99 years so that they can't be developed. Some lots are also owned by not-for-profit groups like Stone Temple. And we also are working with private residences and also institutions like schools. We're working with them with their school gardens. But yeah, Julie, did you want to say anything about land ownership in Guatemala?
Well, we could spend all day about that, but basically there's a larger construct that the land has always been completely inequitably owned in Guatemala. And as we said, the only reason people are up here in the mountains is because all the good land is already taken care of. I mean, in 1954, the US engineered a Cold War coup to assassinate the president of Guatemala because he started make land reform more equitable. So that's where that gets you there. I did want to speak to one other thing I saw in the chat. People were asking about COVID and traditional medicine versus alternative. And I've had a lot of chats with the other nurse down in Afapati. I tend to personally use a lot of alternative medicines, but she was pointing out that up in communities like that, systems are so diminished because they are so impoverished and they have terrible nutrition and so forth. You don't, things pass around, particularly like COVID. So you want to use the traditional medicines to help boost your immune system. But if there were vaccines, that would be great. As far as I know from my contact with people in Guatemala, there are no vaccines there. They are not expecting them until maybe the end of 2022. But part of the programs in Afapati is to help people go back to growing the traditional medicine.
Great comment. I'm also looking at the chat. I think Adele, you had an interesting question about scale up. And then Christina, I think you wanted to comment on Adele's question. So Adele, do you want to make your comment?
Thank you so much for the presentation. I had a quick question regarding how you're able to scale up this practice of permaculture so it can be implemented elsewhere. And if you think that having courses or certifications for planners is something that could be used as a potential solution for this.
Yeah, you know, it would be great. So at the Permaculture Chicago Teaching Institute, we do have certifications. And I also want to say permaculture is based on indigenous practices. So it's not anything new. It has always been around. The only thing that it was created in 1978 by Bill Mollison and David Holmgren. And what they did was they codified all of the best practices of best agricultural practices by region, by climate, and by zone. So what a lot of permaculture is been implemented, but it's like sectioned off. So like agroforestry or agronomy or soil science. And the practice of permaculture it's integrated. You can't have one without the other. Like you can't understand growing food without understanding soil, without understanding the implication of climate. So what I would say is practice of permaculture personally is probably one of the best ways to get it out into the community. And then working, one of the things that you were saying inside of SISE, right, is how come people keep working in silos? And this is why permaculture is not done in silos. Yeah.
And Christina, I think your question is related to that. Did I interrupt someone? I'm sorry if I did.
No.
No. Okay. Christina, maybe you want to make your comment. I think it's related to what we just heard.
Yeah, my question was if the community of North Lawndale also stands in cooperation with other communities around in Chicago that probably face the same problems, and to also apply those, or like create a network and not only help your own community, but also the others.
Yes, you know, one of the things that we do, we are a model in North Lawndale. So we have a group of, it's called the North Lawndale Community Coordinating Council. So that's the main entity, but then we have 13 subcommittees. And so one of the subcommittees is greening, open space, water, soil, and sustainability. So Pastor Reshorna is the chair of that. And also what you saw with the mobile food bus, they're actually from Englewood, or where are they from? Pastor Reshorna, Urban Growers Collective.
Urban is 90th and Mackinac, so it's on the south side of Chicago.
Yeah, so we share all of our resources across Chicago. Our particular group, we really have gotten together, even within North Lawndale. When we make grants, when we request resources, we ask all of the other partners, what do you need? Do you need a water tank? Do you need soil? So the $200,000 grant that we received, we also parceled some of that out to the existing pharmacy that Pastor Reshorna was talking about. We worked together with the North Lawndale Greening Committee, where we have 23 gardens. And do you guys need soil? So we're also working with Little Village, with Pilsen. So yes, to answer your question, our particular organization, we look at Chicago, not just North Lawndale, but we start out in North Lawndale, which is also another permaculture principle, right? You take care of yourself, your family, your block, your area, and then you keep going out. So it's that sense of abundance.
Yeah, we look at it as if North Lawndale is the hub for our permaculture activities, but it spreads abroad the 77 communities, because as Annamaria said, we see Chicago as one Chicago, although we have 77 communities.
And that's also something that we learned from Afopati and through the work that we've been doing in Guatemala, right, Julie? Like it's community.
Yeah. I was reflecting on that because Afopati's been working for 25 years in individual communities, but I've seen, for example, with the huge challenge of water scarcity, they've gone from really working the communities to knowing that they can only come up with some solutions on a municipal level. We're trying to work on that for the pandemic. But then of course they're going out to societal levels, and now they're really trying to work to change some things outside capitalism. So they're big connections.
Great comments. And I see, Alexandra, you had an interesting comment about high altitude agriculture. Would you like to share that one?
Sure. And I also had like a question at the end. So thank you for the presentation. My common question is more geared towards the work in Guatemala. So I know high altitude agriculture is challenging, especially now with climate change and problems like soil degradation and soil erosion are increasing, and they are affecting harvest and crops in general. And it's my understanding that most of it is caused because of policies that were implemented that don't allow crop rotation, that demand certain crops to be harvested. And those crops are not always, but often non-native, and they can harm the ecosystem there. So I was wondering if you guys also work with that and with research, technology, funding to kind of help combat soil degradation and soil erosion, because change in policy, specifically in Latin America, I know is very difficult, and support for agriculture is more difficult. So I was wondering what type of work, and if you work with this too.
Yeah, absolutely. So the thing to remember again is that vast inequity in terms of land distribution. We're working up in areas where for-profit companies don't really want the land except for timber companies. And there's incredible erosion around. Of course, all the permaculture stuff is about replenishing the soil. A lot of agricultural practices became like here, using chemicals and doing monocultures. So Afopati's programs are about crop diversity, permaculture, building up the soil, really going back, as we've been saying, to all those indigenous practices that were good. But again, we're on a vast scale. And so you have to look at the policies in terms of a lot of the political situations, and in Guatemala, you know, you can very easily go to jail or be killed if you're advocating for any of that.
One thing, you know, with that, what I observed when I was in Guatemala, especially with Don Juan Marcos, right? With Don Marcos, up in that high altitude, is he ended up doing terracing. And the other thing that I was really struck with, and I think Julie, you and I had spoken about this, was the Mayan beliefs in corn, right? Like corn is king. So what I observed was that a lot of the mountains were being deforested, first primarily because of the logging companies, but then when you look at the cosmology, right, of the Mayan people, the corn was more important than the trees. So you would see further degradation of the mountaintops where they would try to plant corn, and it wasn't successful because there's no water. So it just kept cascading and cascading. And when you saw Don Juan Marcos there, he was able to reforest like a huge amount of mountain with these trees. And so there's also that psychological and spiritual beliefs that's also involved in that as well. It's very interesting.
Yeah, very well said. Oh, and I'd like to emphasize that so much is cultural and economic. You know, if you are a subsistence farmer and you don't have enough food to get through the day, corn versus a tree for the future is a very difficult challenge. It happens here just as well, but with the extremity infrastructure there and the poverty and the racism and the racism is just so much more extreme. But we can't emphasize enough that corn is the sacred essence of the Mayan culture. And so many things that throughout the years that I've seen people here ask, why don't people just do this or that? You know, why don't they use solar stoves and so forth? A lot of it is our traditions and what people are used to and how open people are closed to change. And that's why I think it's so important, the theme of this in terms of getting out of our silos, learning perspectives from other people, and you know, getting the support to try some things new, even when we're in a real crunch, whether that's climate change or not having enough food for our family that day.
And something, and Pastor Reshorna, I see you want to talk about right before you say that we can liken our how do you say worship of turf grass here in the United States as that. You know, it's like it doesn't make any sense to have all this grass, but yet we still would rather prefer the grass versus a tree. So that same type of psychological and the cosmological way that we view things, you know, our capitalistic views that, you know, a turf grass represents land ownership. So there's all of these things that we don't really think about that affects the decisions that we make every day here in the city as well. Pastor Reshorna?
Yes, so Sebastian had a question. Sebastian, you want to ask a question about how we get permission to do what we do?
Yeah, of course, Pastor Reshorna. So I was wondering, like, how you guys get permission to farm in these abandoned areas. Like one of the ones you mentioned was under like a railway or something. And I know I've heard many stories like in cities like New York and such, that if people do start to like garden for their community, like the police will often just come in and destroy it because they like didn't have permits or they weren't allowed to. So like, how do you guys overcome that, I guess?
Right. So Annamaria spoke earlier about Neighbor Space, an organization that will get a title deed for the land for 99 years. Also, some of this land is owned by non-for-profit organizations like Stone Temple. We own our land. And then there are other private individuals in the community that would allow us to actually work on their land and create food forests on their land. And one of these things I would say, Sebastian, the more people see greening, cleaning, growing these food forests coming into the community, more people become interested. And my concept is they got to see it to want it. And so when you bring it, people then rally around it and they want to support it and they want to have it in their community. So that's how it's happening. And then you talk to your alderman for more spaces that become available, and you just rally up support for what you're trying to do. And people really want to see. The pandemic has really shown us that we need this this food resilience quarters in our community, and that's what we're doing, and we're building them up, and people are wanting more of it. There was another question also in the chat. I'm going to tell you who it's from. It's from Noah. Noah, you may want to ask your question as well.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Pastor Reshorna. Yeah, my question was just about the overall experience of this outreach. Do you feel like it's helped bring a lot of collaboration across different religions and cultures in your city of Chicago?
Absolutely. I will say I am on the board of directors of the organization that got me started in gardening when I retired 3 years ago, Faith in Place. Faith in Place is a organization that deals with creating green spaces and making sure that the ecosystem is really taken care of by, again, us in our environments. And it's all races, it's all religions, it's anybody you can imagine having an interest in making sure that we take care of our earth, take care of one another, and get our fair share. That organization and what we're doing brings everybody together, and it helps us to create this environment that we're sustaining and being good stewards of it. Thanks for
Yeah, please go ahead.
Well, there was a question about what are the major, that Adele sent in, what are the major barriers to your efforts in both Chicago and Guatemala? And what have you done to overcome these challenges? Do you want to address the one for Guatemala, Julie?
I would say the major barrier is often human nature and capitalism. So we'll go at both ends. There are the particulars of the Guatemalan history, which is very extreme. We're involved in a very interesting discussion now for our Sustainable Sharing with Guatemala program on Saturday about microloans and why they haven't particularly worked in Guatemala. And then we found out that in Chicago, some of the big sources for microloans here charge an interest rate of 20%. So that was shocking to us here in the community. So I'd say, overall systemic structures and then personal human behavior.
So if I can comment, you mentioned capitalism as a barrier. We've actually been talking earlier in SISE this year about this question: can capitalism solve climate change? And it's an interesting discussion, let me say. It's not clear that it can. And I'm curious how you guys view capitalism.
Well, in this particular thing I was discussing about the microloans, they were talking about how the microloans that were given within a community to see what was needed in that community and what person in that community needed help. And then we were talking about how they judge success, because the way they have it, you have to save and pay back. And it's very challenging, even though they're small amounts. So the idea was to get people to try to not be thinking of financial profit as the key to success, and be thinking of community and well-being and what people learned during the process, even if it wasn't ultimately successful in a financial way. So again, you're having to deal with those extremities of all the isms there that are rampant in capitalism in terms of racism, sexism, classism, all those kinds of issues. I believe in sharing things, so I think there may be some ways that different systems can work in a complementary fashion. But I think it's up to the generations that are coming up now with climate change so extreme to see if the system of capitalism that's here now is going to be working quick enough in tandem to solve some of these immediate problems.
Yeah, you've just captured all the issues that we've talked about earlier in the week. Is it fast enough? Will climate change win just because we can't act quickly enough? Is it capable of doing it? Maybe the only reward in the system is not money. Maybe it's something else. And you've named some of the things that it could be. So great, you guys are thinking along the same lines that we are. We've already kept you 8 minutes past. If you're willing to stay another couple minutes, I see one more question I'd like to point out. Will that be okay?
Yes.
And it was, I think, from Fernanda, who, yeah, was talking about biodiversity. You had a comment. Would you like to share that?
No. Thank you for your beautiful talk. I really loved Annamaria and Julie talk.
Wonderful.
I don't know what was the question about biodiversity, George?
Well, I'll read it. Biodiversity is the key in my country. With the ancestral knowledge of some native plants, many people have taken refuge in traditional medicine to face the COVID in an alternative way.
Mm-hmm. You know, we also implement inside of our gardens medicinal plants. We actually have one that's called lemon balm, and it's where it's almost all medicinal plants. But you know, diversity is such a hot topic. But when you look at diversity, you know that you have to have access to seeds. And diversity of soil produces diversity of plants. And if you live in Chicago, where we really don't have soil, everything is on top of a built environment. It's a really good question to ask, and it's such a systemic question too, because like we're growers. Pastor Reshorna and I are growers, and Julie is also, you know, you build gardens, Julie. You can only be as diverse as what is out there in the market. So if everybody wants to only grow a certain type of apple because that's what makes money in the capitalistic market, then that's what you're going to get. So you have to take a look at how you can be the source of biodiversity by seed saving, by working with people who have heritage plants. How do you support the indigenous communities? Like in Chicago, they have the American Indian Center, where on their site, they grow their medicinal plants. So we cannot do it individually, again, but as a community, we can impact biodiversity. And then the last thing I'll say, people say great things about having biodiversity, but if you want to also have fruit and vegetables and edible things in your yard, you also have to accept what comes with that, which are the possums and the squirrels and the raccoons and the rats and the mice and all of that. And that's a whole other level, because I put in all kinds of gardens, and people, you know, the moment they see that possum hanging upside down eating their grapes, they're out of there. So, yeah.
Amazing comment.
So I would just say that's, you know, that speaks to human nature and what we can tolerate. And I would just say, you know, all these things are both local and global. So up in those villages in Guatemala, they're dealing with the issues of Monsanto and GMOs. The people have been saving corn seed for generations, but because it became, this is interesting, you know, that it became cultured corn and the men using chemicals and fertilizer. Then the war came, a lot of men were killed, and recently men immigrate, and that's why the women started coming back to being in charge of the farming. So they're doing the three sisters, corn, beans, and squash. But as I said, if the neighboring farmer has some GMO seed and the pollen comes over, you have the same challenges as we do here. So I think an important thing just to learn today is whether it's in North Lawndale and in this gritty neighborhood with lots of vacant lots and lots of people working in amazing community organizations, or up in those mountains of Guatemala where there aren't that many organizations and you're trying to farm on a slope like this. It's all the same issues, and you know, so reach out and try to understand other people's perspective, because the same keys are going to be there.
Right. I think I'll say this in my closing statement. If we would all get together and put everything that we know, our intellectual resources and our resources, period, then we can combat whatever we face, because all of us have the answer. So all of us should come together and realize that we're a human race and we have the answers to our human problems and our earthly problems.
Great comment. And by the way, that exactly mimics something we were talking yesterday about the importance of social networks and connections and people. Not so much technology, but people solving problems. And that's the message I'm hearing from you guys. Really a wonderful message. And if you look, of course, at the chat, you'll see the fellows are loving it. So we really appreciate, we've kept you 13 minutes over. That just shows the interest we have in what you're doing. And this happens, by the way, fellows, every year, that when the